The Government of Canada is obligated to follow the Protocol of Nation-to-Nation Relations, as outlined in treaties forged between First Nations and the settler government. Treaties and international law require the Government of Canada to work directly with First Nation governments to obtain their consent when making changes that will directly or indirectly affect the lives of First Nations people. However, the federal government continues to unilaterally impose programs, policy, and legislation on First Nations without adhering to this protocol.
We are not participating in the development of national First Nations education legislation because we know that any kind of legislation that is perpetrated, developed, designed by the Government of Canada will only serve the Government of Canada's needs. It will not truly reach the needs of our students in special education, in Head Starts, in elementary and secondary schools. We need equitable funding to be able to fully participate in Canadian society.
We passed a resolution in last October saying that the imposed legislation is not what First Nations want. Unanimously passed at a National Chiefs meeting. The Prime Minister goes out directly after that and says, I'm going to institute legislation anyway. So the relationship and the understanding from the First Nations and the federal government is just not there. We have to realize if that relationship is not there, what are we going to do? Our children cannot be marginalized to the point that they've been marginalized now, where they are financially worth only half of what Ontario young people are worth.
The federal government has blinders on. The federal government wants to go one way. They have an idea that they want to do education legislation. And no matter what happens, no matter how many times we say no to that, no matter how many different ways we say no to that, we can do rallies, we can do protests, we can do resolutions, we can stand up in Parliament. They're going down this road and they're not listening to us at all. They're having a consultation process, they're not going to listen to us. It's a total disregard for the position of the Chiefs in Ontario. Clearly, the federal government is not following the nation-to-nation protocol that was agreed to in the treaty-making process. Instead, the Government of Canada continues the pattern of blatant paternalism by disregarding the voice of First Nation governments. It is high time the federal government admits they have no professional capacity to deliver education legislation. The history of federal control has produced the current dismal outcomes of 33% graduation rates. Canada must work together with First Nations towards the realization of First Nation control over the education of their own people in order to achieve better outcomes.